everyone, and welcome to the final session of the day. So far, the title of our session and the focus is going to be Academic Integrity and Artificial Intelligence, or as people are saying, AI and AI. My name is Ronan Bree, and I'm the Institutional Lead for Tutor in Dundalk Institute of Technology. So we have 4 speakers today. We have Dr. Ellen McCabe from ETU, and also part of the Tutor team here. We have DKIT Tutor Fellows, Anne Everett Reynolds and Joe Tracy. We have TU Dublin's Dr. Cormac McMahon, and we have TUS, we have Geraldine McDermott joining us as well. So quite an array of speakers from across the technological higher education sector. We've been told we have to have a hard stop at 4:20 because of the close of the session. So we're just running a couple of minutes behind. So what we'll try and do is have a couple of questions after each presentation, and each talk should last approximately 15 minutes. So I'm going to hand over now so we can try and keep to time as best as we can to Dr. Ellen McCabe, who'll kickstart the session.
Okay, thanks very much, Ronan. So yeah, my name is Dr. Ellen McCabe, and I'm the Teaching and Learning Coordinator within Tutor. And I'm going to be talking a bit today about supporting a community of practice, or supporting a community approach to academic integrity with digital badges. Sorry, I'm not sure why they're not moving on there now. Okay, that's great. So a little bit about the challenges. Supporting a culture of academic integrity, and then badges that we have available at the moment in ATU Sligo for lecturers and for students for academic integrity, and that we're planning to roll out across the TU sector with Tutor and some additional supports. So kind of looking at the challenges around academic integrity, this is Donald Creasy's fraud triangle, which was kind of developed looking at research around embezzlers, but it's kind of like a nice basic model for thinking about the different factors that push people to behave fraudulently or to act without academic integrity. So students have like a lot of opportunity when it comes to cheating, and they often do so if they feel that consequences are unlikely, and they're kind of targeted a lot by advertisements relating to essay mills, and even that's kind of being overtaken now with ChatGPT. So kind of looking at where these different elements can be kind of alleviated a bit for students. So looking at pressure, if they feel they have like a lack of time or energy, is that something that we can kind of address, like through communication with colleagues and avoiding like bottlenecks around assessments, or considering continuous assessment where possible, pointing out supports that are available to them, like some of the ones I'll be talking about today. So where low confidence is a factor that can add to the pressure. So where possible, again, like communicating with students and seeing maybe what kind of issues are occurring there or how they can be addressed in relation to confidence. Opportunities for low stakes skills testing, where we can do that, and supports in relation to study skills that I'll talk a bit about later, and supporting those core skills that students really need to have the confidence that they need in approaching their studies. Being really clear around expectations as well can have a big impact in relation to alleviating pressure, in terms of like the language and the layout and your assessment instructions, and also things like, is your Moodle page or your VLE page easy to navigate? You know, you can kind of get used to looking at it yourself, but taking a kind of a broad view of it, is it easy for students to find the things they need there, and is there kind of a uniform approach to it? Are locations of relevant resources obvious and easy to find? Then kind of looking at rationalization. So if students can kind of feel that this is a low priority, and it's kind of talked a little bit about by Julie Salmon there in the keynote, putting it into context for them, why it's important. But if they feel they only really need to pass this and it doesn't really matter, it doesn't really have much to do with their future career, that can like bolster that rationalization aspect for them. And also this kind of perception maybe that everyone does it, so why shouldn't I? And it's really instilling that sense that we're all behaving ethically, that we all want to be kind of proud of the work we do in our studies and be able to stand over qualifications, and that's their responsibility, as well as staff members and everyone else working at the university. And this idea that prevention is better than cure, and that ethical behaviour and principles are going to stand to them in the long run. And we look at kind of opportunity. I guess there's kind of limits to what we can do around this. We can't really physically prevent students from accessing things like ChatGPT or SEMills or other services, but we can let them know what's going on in relation to kind of targeting by different organizations and the consequences of that, and how they can be quite exploitative, that they can prey on vulnerabilities. And there have been instances of blackmail or just not delivering on material that's been paid for, and also to make them aware that you're going to monitor for plagiarism and follow up where you see issues arising. So making information as well around university policies really easy for them to find, and that they're linked directly on your VLE page. So again, it's this idea that we can't really completely eradicate plagiarism, but we can kind of support this culture to kind of reduce the temptation to behave in a kind of an unethical way. So when we're looking at kind of supporting this culture, what we're talking about is creating a conversation around academic integrity. That students are part of a community that want to uphold this good standard along with staff members that they can be proud of. Like underlining the fact that they have invested their time, like years of their lives and their money to be here, and do they want to kind of jeopardize that investment by undermining it? And what does academic integrity kind of mean for their course, their assessment, their discipline, and their professional lives? And things like, can you kind of co-create an honor code based on that? If they have ownership of it, they're more likely to take it seriously. And kind of sharing your own personal concerns as well, like what you might be worried that students will do and why you're worried about that. And that kind of personal moral connection might make them less likely to want to sort of let you down. And supporting and kind of modeling academic integrity. So using citations yourself, in your own work and your own resources, and pointing them towards supports that are there to help them. The academic integrity badge I'm talking about later in a moment, but also the academic writing centre. In ATU, we also have an academic skills badge, and those things are there to kind of scaffold the skills students will need to behave ethically, and to ensure that accidental kind of plagiarism doesn't occur. So that, again, kind of supporting that confidence that they know how to cite and research appropriately and effectively, that alleviates that pressure and stress element. And considering assessment as well, like make sure it's really, really meaningfully framed in the context of the course and of their overall learning. And so again, that rationalizing aspect, and is it possible to even design out cheating to a certain extent, like moving away from reproducing information and instead constructing something from what they have learned, and kind of showing development using the information. And as well asking them to affirm academic integrity on each assessment, like is a cover note included? Like that can be built into the VLE as well, that they have to tick a box or sign to say that this is their own work. And opportunities again for low stakes assessment, where mistakes are kind of an opportunity to learn and give feedback. So this kind of all building into the culture of academic integrity. But looking at where we have resources to support that. To be able to do all this, you kind of need a good sense of the principles of academic integrity yourself, and what that means in actual classroom activities and assessments and relationships with your students. So to kind of assist with that, we have an academic integrity badge for staff, which was developed by Epigeum. We also, along with those kind of specific resources, we also have academic writing badge and academic study skills badge, that kind of support those core skills or what would have been kind of soft skills that students need to kind of study and to fulfill their assessments effectively. So kind of scaffolding those kind of methods of assessment as well as the content. So looking at the staff badge, first of all, first we kind of have this word cloud with terms associated with academic integrity. This is a Moodle course, or is built into Moodle. It's a SCORM course that can be used in any VLE, and it's self-directed. It's a really simple structure. There's 3 main sections: exploring academic integrity, breaches of academic integrity, teaching assessment, and design. And it's modular, so you can kind of choose whichever you feel is most relevant to you. And once you've completed all 3 sections, you'll be issued with the badge in academic integrity. So the first section looks at kind of like what academic integrity actually is, the context in the context of the classroom and the curriculum. So it's very practical. We kind of have this, it has a variety of media, so there's a little bit of variation there to keep it kind of engaging. We have this like introductory animation, video testimonials of what academic integrity means to various kind of lecturers, students, and employers. And based on that kind of complete and interactive activity matching, where you matching terms to definitions. So there's little bits of kind of engaging activities to make it a little bit more interesting. Looking at kind of why academic integrity matters, and you're given like scenarios for like this one where a student has anxiety, it could be a risk of cheating due to that pressure element, and the different staff who engaged with him, supported him, and putting those principles into context. Looking as well at like who's responsible, and here's like the example of a student who joined late, has access to a friend's essay from the previous year, so we're kind of at risk there in that situation. And this one is looking at it kind of like an interactive graphic, so it's a nice mix of media, but kind of keeping it appropriate to the context. So this is quite a good basis for you as a lecturer to get an insight into applying the principles of academic integrity to the learning environment in quite a practical way. So beginning to support that like culture of academic integrity and create a conversation around ethical behavior and why it's relevant. So kind of taking that to the next step, then you want your students to be able to engage in this process. And to do that, they really need to be informed participants to really get the most out of it and contribute kind of effectively as well. So to do that, they need to be informed, but you don't necessarily have the class time to dedicate to that, or to seek out or create resources to help explain that for them. So this kind of helps you with that process. It talks a lot about the pressures on students, how SA Mills targets students and the consequences of that. There's a new edition of this coming out that will more specifically address ChatGPT, so it's a little bit playing catch up with the technology there. But looking at how it can be kind of exploitative, and alternatives to help you address problems that might lead you to cheat or behave without academic integrity. It's open to students all year, and at any time it's self-directed as well and automatically assessed. And it's only 2.5 hours, so it's not that onerous. Again, it's looking at kind of the three kind of main sections. Demonstrating or defining academic integrity is 30 minutes, demonstrating academic integrity in my work an hour, and breaches and difficult situations also 1 hour. So in terms of like layout and content, it's quite similar to the badge for lecturers, but obviously looking at it more from a student perspective. And there's a lot of video testimonials and animations looking at examples of different students and what they want to get out of their study. So again, like putting it into the context and like instilling that kind of sense of wanting to behave ethically, and encouraging students to ask themselves, am I acting with integrity in this situation? And the consequences of acting without academic integrity, even if you're never caught. So the immediate consequences, but the broader consequences of the development of you as a student, the reputation of your institution, the value of your qualification, and the integrity of your discipline. And so kind of developing that social conscience in their work as well. So it's a good way to build that basic knowledge and to scaffold a conversation around academic integrity and empower students to behave ethically and take pride in their work and their progress. So a number of lecturers in Sligo have embedded this into their Moodle pages and into their course, and even like apportioned part of the grade to it. And to do that, it's really important to be able to track progress. And the good thing about this badge is it's really easy to do that using the progress bar. So groups are created for specific lecturers with their students, and they can really easily just filter down and see which students have completed which elements of the badge. This kind of coming to the end of the presentation now is just the badge is a kind of a really useful off-the-shelf resource to kind of scaffold that engagement, ensure that students are informed enough to participate in a conversation around academic integrity and develop that kind of sense of a conscience around it and a culture within the institute. Embed those core skills that like students have the confidence and that they won't make mistakes, that have confidence in their own work, and accidental plagiarism is less likely to occur. It can be embedded into assessment as well, and the kind of support an understanding of behaving ethically in relation to assessments, and can be used as a kind of a basis for maybe a collaborative activity where students have the grounding in this kind of broad themes of academic integrity and how it's applied, but then maybe talking about it more specifically in relation to your subject or discipline, and how it can be applied there. So that's the end of the presentation. If anyone wants to have questions, or if you want to leave them to the end, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. Any questions from anyone? Any online? I thought, Ellen, I liked some of the words that you used. They all began with C: communication, conversation, community, and co-creation. At one point, you mentioned later on about the value of the students, communicating with them about the future value of their degree is fundamentally based on the approach, as you said, supporting them to behave ethically, because the future of all our institutions will be, and the quality of their degree in the future is all dependent on those practices that they engage with during their degree. So those conversations you mentioned, I think, are of huge value. So thank you very much, Ellen. Really appreciate your input today and sharing that with us.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I might move to the second set of speakers. So Anne Reynolds and Joe Tracy are both lecturers in the Department of Nursing and Midwifery and Early Years in Dundalk Institute of Technology, and they're both recipients of tutor fellowships also. So they're joining forces today. So Anne and Joe, I'll let you share your screen and introduce your talk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to the organisers, AIT, for inviting me to speak today. I hope you can see my presentation. So my name is Anne Everett Reynolds. I am one of the lecturers in Dundalk Institute of Technology, as Ronan said, and our project is understanding the value and practice of academic integrity in professional nursing and midwifery undergraduate programmes. So in terms or by means of introduction, so with regard to academic integrity, as you know, the conference has been talking about today, all stakeholders in Irish higher education sectors face multiple challenges and indeed threats to academic integrity, more so than ever before. And this is compounded by things like information overload that students are constantly telling us about, as well as operating alongside increasingly sophisticated contract cheating services, much of it which we have heard quite a lot about in recent weeks. And therefore, I suppose, from our perspective, a good understanding of what these threats and challenges are, both from a student and a staff perspective, would inform a suite of methods that could potentially be used to effectively promote academic integrity within the institute. So by way of introducing the rest or some of the rest of the team, we don't have pictures for everybody, unfortunately, today for you. So some of the colleagues that are involved in this NTutor project with me are Joe Tracy from intellectual disability background, along with Elizabeth Murphy, who's also a nursing lecturer in intellectual disability, and my colleague there, Madeline Caldwell, who, like myself, is a general nursing lecturer on the nursing programs here in Dundalk Institute of Technology. Our other colleagues, both staff and students, I didn't have pictures today. They didn't send them to me to show you the rest of the team, but we have other lecturers and indeed students from first to fourth year participating in the project. So with regards to who'll benefit from this NTutor fellowship that we received, specifically students in first year will benefit initially from it, and those undertaking a module called the Learning to Learn module. It is a module across the 4 disciplines, so it is a shared module across all undergraduate nursing and midwifery programs, and this is where students are initially introduced to academic integrity and preparing themselves for writing an academic assignment. Other students that will involve, I suppose, benefit from the fellowship will be all other undergraduate nursing students, because it is anticipated that what we find, or the findings, the resources that we would develop, will have an impact in for other modules in the undergrad nursing and midwifery programs. And in addition to that, there is potential to benefit our postgraduate students as well. So with regards to the aims of our project, there are multiple aims, one of them being to facilitate a consistent and unified approach to academic integrity, both from a learning perspective of students, but also for the training, the information that's provided to students by indeed lecturers or other staff within the college. The aim overall would be to review the usefulness and indeed the type of resources that are available to students. And we know that students have multiple avenues to find out information around academic integrity. In our own institute, we have quite a lot of information, both from a library perspective, but also from the Centre for Learning and Teaching. And lecturers also have their own individual resources in teaching modules, for example. So we're looking to review all of that to empower and afford students the space and the opportunity to partner with staff, to proactively engage and influence, if you like, the establishment of a departmental culture, not only about the values of academic integrity, but also to further promote it in terms of champions with regards to their student body. We hope to create a dedicated space with students that we can dialogue between students and staff around the challenges that we are all facing, and get a shared understanding of maybe how we're engaging with academic integrity. The project will generate recommendations, some of which will be immediately actionable. So for example, initially we would gain information around what students are finding useful, what they find difficult, maybe what's confusing. Is it that maybe some of the information they are being exposed to is not, I suppose, varies, and therefore is causing confusion for students, and our lecturers actually saying the same thing. Other recommendations would be maybe as part of programmatic review, so they would be maybe later on in the development of the resources, or indeed the learning out of this. It could lead into learning outcomes for programmatic review or for further development. Other deliverables in this particular project is the central thing here, as with I suppose the theme of the conference as well would be about students and partnership, and students are central to this whole project, and we need to hear their voice. So creating that partnership approach to student is fundamental if we're going to deliver on the project as we planned. A unified approach to teaching, again, allowing the students to let us know, what they find useful, and for staff to think about how we're approaching it so that it is of benefit to students, that we give the supports for student learning, that they can develop their academic integrity skills, not only in first year, but as they progress through the programme. So on this slide here, it's just the project process. So what are we hoping to do here? So this project is really only going to start in September of this year. We have given information currently to students and staff, but the bigger consultation meeting between students and staff will happen in September. We will ask our lecturing department to facilitate students who are going to involve themselves initially in the project. So those that are going to be part of the stakeholder group in the project, insofar as that, to allow them time to maybe meet, but also to allow them time, because this project is looking at creating surveys to generate analysis around the information pertaining to what works and maybe what and why it works. And we do need to engage with students around that, and time is important. Our nursing and midwifery students their program is extremely tight, and they're out on placement as well, which gives them less time in the college. So therefore, optimizing their time while they're in college is going to be fundamental to this project. So getting our lecturing staff to help facilitate students in their involvement is going to be crucial. The project aims to get students to co-create surveys with us so that we can gather and analyse information that's going to be useful to students, but also to lecturers when we are considering academic integrity. Like, where are students going for this information? We need to find out. We need to find out, how they find those resources, if they find resources that isn't applicable or, that we're using, that they can be removed, and maybe look at creating further resources perhaps. Other aspects of the program, the project would be focus groups with relevant stakeholders, because academic integrity for us is taught in a first year program, but students would also engage with support tutors over in the Centre for Teaching and Learning and the library staff. It would be important to engage with those in terms of a focus group around academic integrity. All data that will be obtained will be used to co-create, co-design an action plan that can be used to promote academic integrity, and maybe to look to see about getting champions to help us to do that. Additionally, with regards to the collaboration that's going to be done in terms of the findings, will be disseminated by both students and staff, and not just one or other of the partners. In terms of student engagement, we are going to adhere to the NSTEP framework in terms of student partnership. So the approach that we're going to take would be, as I've mentioned earlier, meaningful dialogue. We do need to create an environment where students can have their say, that they're not going to be just passive recipients of the education, that they are going to help us to create resources that they find meaningful, that they can use to help with understanding academic integrity. And some of that is going to be challenging when you're looking at AI and where students possibly are going for their information. But we need to build trust with students so that we can engage in this process. Developing, I suppose, inclusivity. Again, that can be done with the group that come forward, but also include the larger student population in terms of the surveys that will be created, and that we will empower through the project, be able to empower students to engage, to be partners, to co-create processes and indeed outcomes that would be benefit to the student body themselves. And it is envisaged that this would possibly go wider than just our own academic department. And our colleagues have shown some interest in that as well. So in the promoting of inclusion, initially, the steps will be information sessions, both in class and lunchtime. Some of that has started, but it's exam time, so we need to rerun that early in September and get as many students involved as possible. We do have a cohort, but we'd like a few more to be involved. We will have a working lunch so that individuals, both lecturers and students, can seek further clarification on the projects, the outcomes, for further information that they require, particularly if there's any instance where they might feel, oh, I don't know whether I have the time to actually be involved, because what we're looking for is, yes, involvement, but not to add to stress of students, that they are able to do this work in an academic day and therefore be able to attend to their own learning for modules and not encroach on that. The inclusivity of students, as I mentioned, that is going to happen with regards to the surveys and indeed focus groups, which will be decided by the partnership group with students and staff when we're discussing what type of a survey, or indeed what would the focus groups be like. And in order to facilitate meetings with students, there's only so much we can do in the first part of the semester. From September to December next year, our students will go on placement, and to make sure that we can carry on with those team meetings, if they can't happen face to face, we will go to online and facilitate those conversations with students in an online forum. In terms of the impact of this particular project, with engaging with students and getting information both from a staff perspective as well, we will be able to identify the challenges that students encounter and indeed the challenges that staff encounter, so that together we can look at how we can overcome those challenges. And I think that's part and parcel to this end-step framework on partnership, that we'd actually look to ensure that it is a mutual respectful dialogue that's happening, and that those principles of academic integrity we can learn, both parties, I suppose, can learn and apply those principles in a manner that best suits those individuals. The project will inform the redesign of our teaching strategies and the delivery of how we engage with students about academic integrity, and also to promote multiple means of representation to cater for the diverse learning needs of students that we're seeing within our institutes. It will identify exactly what our students' knowledge currently is with regards to academic integrity, and then to use the tools and supports that we develop together to support students around the whole area of academic integrity. So the co-creation of new resources, we think, will be important, but also would allow students to gain maximum benefit from these supports. As we said, we have quite a lot of information within our institute, some of which students access, some of which they don't. So a good scoping out of what they're engaging in would help us further develop them or co-create new ones in terms of the actions moving forward. Overall, what we're looking to do here is to develop.
Great. I guess I'll start. So really, this is just a whistle-stop tour on some work we've been doing primarily at TU Dublin, but also in collaboration with some of the partners on the NTutor project, on how we can use computational techniques to measure essentially the level of embeddedness of sustainability in the curriculum. As you know, it's become a very hot topic of recently. SDG 4.7 is really a mandate for all higher education institutions to develop, graduate attributes that are, akin to having the skills, mindsets, and knowledge, and values to live sustainable lives. So there's a major sort of engineering or rewriting of higher education curriculum currently underway to essentially reflect that paradigm, if you like. And it's not easy because, as you know, most of our curriculum is written in the form of text, which means that we need to be able to measure and quantify that text in some way. So one, I suppose, appropriate way to do that, if you like, is to use AI techniques or natural language processing to evaluate the level of embeddedness. Just to give you a very brief background to the sort of a policy agenda in relation to sustainability in higher education. I think most of us probably would want to have our head stuck in the sand, not at this stage to have heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they were really the culmination of 2 or 3 major pieces of work with respect to understanding the global issues with respect to sustainability in the earlier part of this millennium, so in the noughties and in the teens, if you like. The first part of that was environmental, and there was some very interesting work done by the Stockholm Resilience Institute looking at the major geochemical systems that ecosystems and life-supporting ecosystems that assist living on planet Earth, and they found that there were in fact 9 major systems that were under significant environmental pressure. If you ever want to have a look, I think it's on Netflix. They kind of popularized that into a very interesting movie called Breaking Boundaries, and it looks at all aspects of those environmental pressures, including climate change, the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle, which is at the moment is causing significant dead zones along major coastal population centers. We have the biodiversity crisis, land uses crisis, water scarcity crisis, and a number of other major global planetary environmental pressures. In parallel with that work, there was some great work done by, I suppose, I'd call them left-leaning economists on the idea that part of the issue is how humanity interacts with the environment, and our, I suppose, most common narrative around economic thinking has, for certainly in the recent past, neglected the idea of natural resources being essential to economic well-being. You probably all remember from school the idea of the factors of production was land, labor, and capital, and land was really a kind of a symbol for all sorts of natural resources. So economists like Kate Raworth, who works for Oxfam, have been looking at this idea of ensuring that all of humanity has a minimum level of access to those natural or those resources, natural and others, to lead dignified lives. So there is a very strong social underpinning to the idea of sustainability that looks at things like poverty, access to food, access to good education and health, gender equality, and so on. And essentially, there's an intertwine, therefore, between the environmental issues, the social issues, and the economic issues. And the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, are essentially a reflection of those 3 pillars. On the top row, which you can't see very well there in the slide, goals 1 to 6 are primarily social in nature. And on the bottom row, goals 13 to 17 are primarily environmental in nature. And then in the middle row, goals 7 to 12 are primarily economic in nature. And since the formulation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, one of the key societal transitions or transformations that has been recognized as being necessary to achieve those goals is around education. So SDG 4 is in itself a goal within the Sustainable Development Goal framework, but it's also considered an enabler to achieving all of the other goals. So consequently, there's been a number of very high profile policy documents that have come out that are designed to assist institutions at all levels of education to adapt to the sustainability paradigm. One of the most useful ones was produced by UNESCO, and you can see it there in the top right of that slide. It's called Education for Sustainable Development Goals, Learning Objectives. But there are others. So, for example, in the UK, Advanced HE and QAA came out with some really good guidance on integrating sustainability into higher education. And in Ireland, we have a second version now of the National Strategy for Education for Sustainable Development. As a result of that sort of policy framework that's emerged, institutions all over the world really have begun to look at how can they map their curriculum to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And there's some great toolkits out there. Two that really come to mind is University College Cork have an excellent SDG toolkit, which provides an interpretive framework for all educators to look at their courses and consider how they are relevant to particular goals. And De Montfort University also has a very similar planning framework. In TU Dublin, I suppose most of the other technological universities that have formed in the recent past, there is essentially a new strategic intent that is, I suppose, pivotal to the formation and the identity formation of TU Dublin. And one of the key objectives within that strategic intent is this idea of having sustainability as a learning outcome in every program. So in some respects, that's a major departure. In the past, TU Dublin, like others, would have had flagship sustainability programs in things like sustainable energy or environmental planning or sustainable food and so on, that were really seen as separate knowledge domains. Now there's this effort, if you like, to fulfill that SDG 4.7 mandate by essentially rewiring our programs to justify a learning outcome with respect to sustainability. And if we kind of look at that through our traditional sort of QA, QE hat, then by virtue of supporting a program level learning outcome in all our programs, there has to be sufficient evidence in our constituent modules and courses to justify that program learning outcome. And just to finish on the kind of background point to this, I think sustainable development, the sort of contemporary definition of sustainable development comes from as far back as the 1980s, when Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Prime Minister of Norway, was convened by the United Nations to look at some major environmental issues. And her working group defined sustainable development as development that needs the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's quite value laden, if you like, and in many respects, if you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they are intrinsically supported by a very specific set of values, and this is kind of part of the challenge of sustainability. Is it means so many different things to so many different people. It's not in itself a knowledge domain. It's a set of underpinning values that cuts across all knowledge domains, if you like. Here you can see some of the very relatively new, should I say, documents that have started to emerge to support the sort of sustainability in the curriculum agenda. The United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, that's SDSN, have an excellent document called Getting Started with the SDGs in Universities. I mentioned the UNESCO document, and subsequent to the UNESCO document, there has been a relatively recent competency framework for sustainable development produced within the EU called Green Comp, and it provides an excellent set of resources around expected learning outcomes and so on that our education systems need to deliver on. So just back to the task at hand, if you like, is how do we sort of look at that idea of embeddedness of sustainability in the curriculum? And I just wanted to point out that it's not just an issue for higher education institutions. The professional bodies have really moved on this agenda as well. And you can see here's an example from Engineers Ireland. Their new accreditation criteria includes a program area on sustainability, and they specifically reference the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, along with types of competencies such as critical thinking and systems thinking that you will see in the Green Comp document. The reason I put the title of, I suppose, AI and natural language processing in the presentation is there's actually a very good website that's indicative of how far AI is beginning to assist in this agenda. It's called osdg.ai. And it's a very simple platform open to anyone of the public where you can basically plonk in your text, if you like, into this box, or you can upload a file such as a PDF, and you can click the button and it will do the sort of natural language processing for you, and it'll print essentially the appropriate SDGs associated with that text. So it is very possible now to take any piece of text and map it using relatively simple computational techniques to the sustainable development goals. And also, just to mention, it's not just Engineers Ireland that is pursuing this. There are a large number of professional bodies out there now that are really moving to make sure that sustainability is integrated into the professional accreditation criteria of their modules. If we look now at our sort of normal academic language with regard to the curriculum, I think most of you will probably be familiar with this. So, a program is typically 3 to 4 years for an undergrad, 1 to 2 for a postgrad. We're used to specifying the level in terms of the National Qualifications Framework. So a level 9 would be a master's program, for example, or a level 8 might be an honours degree program. And we're also used to specifying the number of credits associated with modules, and they are usually congruent with the amount of learning hours and effort that has to go into undertaking that particular module or course. And the same very much applies to a module. We specify the credits, the level, the intended learning outcomes, an indicative syllabus, the learning and teaching methods, what assessments are used to evaluate or assess the learning outcomes, and any resources that are required for the course. Here you see a very simple example of a module, and apologies for the small text. I just pulled this off of our own system a couple of days ago. It's a typical module in corporate strategy. This one happens to be, and you can see it has 6 module learning outcomes. The first one there is evaluate key strategic environmental factors, and the last one is evaluate ethical and corporate governance issues. Then you have, you can see on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, the indicative syllabus. On the top right, you have the assessment criteria, if you like, and then finally you have the bottom right, the learning resources. So most of us would be largely used to, that type of language in terms of how we document our curriculum. And if you want to frame this as a kind of a research project or a challenge, a problem-based project, then we've kind of got two questions, if you like, that we're trying to address. First of all, can we measure the embeddedness of sustainability in those documents, in the module descriptors? And secondly, based on the module descriptors, can we determine which SDGs are most relevant that are being addressed by the module descriptor itself? To achieve that, we've tried to use some standardized frameworks. And the first of those is by an organization based in the United States called the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And they have an accreditation framework for any university that wants to convey their achievements in sustainability. One of the key elements of that accreditation framework is the curriculum or the education offered by the institution. And what the accreditation system requires each institution to do is categorize their modules into three types. The first is sustainability focused modules. So these are modules that have a primary and explicit focus on a sustainability issue. So I'm thinking again something like sustainable energy systems or climate change. And then we might have a large number of modules that mightn't specifically be focused on sustainability, but have certain topics within them that address a sustainability issue. And these would be called sustainability inclusive modules, or sustainability in mind is the sort of a colloquial term that we've begun to use in TU Dublin. And lastly, any module that is what we consider there's no sustainability in it at all. Now, again, these categories are slightly open to interpretation, which is a bit of a challenge. So we've again decided the best way to try and categorize our modules is to use computational techniques. And just to note that accreditation system from the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, you can see that the curriculum or the academic part of it provides a very sizable chunk of the accreditation system. There are other issues that the system also evaluates, such as operations and leadership and planning and administration. But generally, if you've got your education portfolio right, you're going to score highly overall in the system. And the second part then of the question is really, how do we then go about mapping those sustainable development goals into individual modules? So the steps that we've taken to try and address this is, first of all, we've taken the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development document, which includes all of the goals and its underpinning targets and indicators, and extracted what we call the keywords or root keywords. And a root keyword, it might be something like sustainab, which might reflect the word sustainability or sustainable. So it's that kind of first part of the word, if you like, that's crucial. And then what we've done is we've undertaken some computation to look at the frequency of those keywords in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and attributed a weighting to those words. We've called that weighting a sustainability importance score. And based then on the presence of those keywords.
Cormac.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cormac, we just have another minute, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Based on the presence of those keywords, if you like, we've been able to determine the sustainability importance score of each module. So that's the calculation in terms of the sustainability importance score. It's really just a percentage of the appearance of that word in a particular SDG. Here's some very simple examples of keywords: recycle, relige, rights, road, and so on. And in essence, using those keywords and some computational techniques, then we're able to categorize our modules into one of those three categories: sustainability focused, sustainability in mind, and no sustainability element. And then secondly, we're able to attribute the most likely SDGs based on the prevalence of those keywords in the document. I'll jump down very briefly to an example of how that might appear in a curriculum management system. So here's a timber skills module, and you can see it has all the usual information about the number of credits, the level on the NQF, but also now we're able to attribute the appropriate SDGs and also categorize it based on the ASH STAR framework, which is the accreditation system. And that has been used now within the university to rewrite learning outcomes to enhance the overall sustainability importance of scores. And lastly, I just finished with the point that if we're able to do this in a reasonably robust and systematic fashion, then what we're also beginning to see now is universities market or promote their curriculum through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals, so that prospective learners can basically look at courses and see which SDGs are relevant to those courses, and they, I suppose it becomes a factor in their decision making as to whether or not to pursue them. So that's it in a nutshell from me. If you have any questions at this stage, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thanks, Cormac. Very thorough, really a great overview and introduction to SDGs, but then also going into a how-to and showing us some really good kind of resources to reflect on, especially those kind of tools you had from UCC, the reflective mapping. But I think you provided us with the most popular AI tool that's going to get a lot of hits later on, the OSDG.ai, for people to see how that works. It could be a way for them to start thinking in that process. So thanks for sharing that. Just in the interest of time, because I know we have to move to our close in at 20 past, I might move to the final speaker of the session, but thanks so much, Cormac. So our final speaker is Dr. Geraldine McDermott, who is a senior lecturer and education developer at TUS. And her title of her talk is Academic Integrity and Academic Intelligence, Steadying the Ship in Uncertain Waters. So I can see your screen now, Geraldine. And
thanks very much, Ronan. Can you hear me okay as well?
And I can hear you. I can hear you speaking too. So after you, Geraldine. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, folks. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as well, just in case there's anything that comes in. So good afternoon, everybody. And I'm delighted to be part of this. There's been a lot of talk today about AI or artificial intelligence. And I suppose I wanted to, bearing in mind the time of the evening it is, kind of go at this in a slightly different way. So that's why I kind of decided to go with the Steadying the Ship in Uncertain Waters title for the presentation. And before I get into it, there's a couple of things I wanted to maybe share with you. First, clarity around my own title. I think in maybe the printed program, I might have been called a doctor. I'm not there yet, folks. So I'm just going to clarify that and apologize for the error. And I think given the fact that I'm talking about academic integrity, it's really important that I'm honest about that, so you won't miss the irony of it. The other thing as well is, I suppose, if you look at the screen, you'll see that I have an AI-generated image with DALL-E, and you have the prompt there as well on the screen. But I wanted, because the conference is happening in Galway, I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to get a Galway hooker, the image of a Galway hooker in stormy seas. However, DALL-E did not like that. So thankfully, at least those constraints on content guidelines are working. So that was an interesting one for me. So I am, as Ronan said, a senior lecturer and an educational developer within the Department of Lifelong Learning. And the areas that I teach are essentially research methods, and I work with master's students on their dissertation modules and things like that. So AI for me was really, I suppose, front and center this year particularly, and that's why I was kind of looking at it from the point of view of academic integrity, because it is that time of year we're all correcting, you know, and it's something that we're faced with. And I've had a number of queries from colleagues across TUS about, you know, what do we do in the face of this new development? So when I was looking to the news to see kind of, you know, what was there about artificial intelligence, one of the things that struck me was the real alarmist nature. Now, you know, I haven't had my head buried for the last 6 months since AI made the news with ChatGPT, but I think it was just a case of, my goodness, look how alarmist a lot of these headlines are. So we're thinking about really kind of negative terms. You know, it needs to be banned because of privacy concerns. We're going to lose jobs over it. It's going to be impossible to mark coursework. It's the end of the essay, you'll see later on as well. And that's why I just wanted to kind of say, steady on. keep calm, you know, the t-shirt. Let's see what we can do with this, because we are experienced in the area of education, and let's see if we can actually manage this as we would have managed lots of the educational developments over the years. So with that in mind, I suppose looking to AI, I was kind of thinking, okay, well, what's all the hype about? You know, AI is already part of our lives. It's part of everything we do, whether it's weak AI, you know, if you're getting a mower to mow your lawn, if you're using a chatbot to, I use Vodafone, you know, I'm not a big fan of the chatbot. I think it could be better, but certainly I do use it. If you've got Siri or Alexa, and even the Face ID on your phones, those are all things that we don't even think about. You know, we're happy for AI to do these things more efficiently for us. So what's all the hype then about ChatGPT? In order to understand that, I kind of needed to get a little bit under the bonnet and try and understand, you know, what was this generative AI and the underlying principles behind it. And without becoming a computer scientist overnight, which I certainly didn't, I was trying to understand the differences between the supervised learning or the weak AI, so something that needed that human supervision, where it learns to do something based on the inputs and the outputs, or the expected outputs that we want it to do, and then the unsupervised learning, where the models or the algorithms learn based on patterns or structures to identify those patterns and to give an output on it. And then again, I suppose reinforcement learning kept coming up, and that was an important one for me, where there is supervision but learning from decisions, so key decision making in the context of that machine learning. And because ChatGPT is generative AI, that was something that I was thinking about. Okay, well, right now I understand what's happening behind it, that natural language processing, understanding what ChatGPT is, as you would normally do, obviously, when you're talking about AI, is you ask AI to explain it to you. And I thought what was interesting for me was that it's almost not just natural language processing, but it's even the sense of I understand and I process natural language. And that almost gives it a human element. And I think that's one of the key differentiators. So starting from that point, understanding generative AI, understanding what's behind ChatGPT then, I was thinking about those headlines again, and I was going, my goodness, have we opened Pandora's box here? I've heard AI or generative AI, specifically ChatGPT. I mean, it was likened to the advent of the internet or the printing press, really monumental developments in our world, you know, that was going to change how we have, how we do things in the future and so on. And that may be the case. But the key thing is we're in the present, so we have to deal with that right now. So how can we deal with that in the context of our work as educators within higher education in Ireland? What can we do? And I suppose given this theme for this particular stream of the conference and academic integrity, I asked ChatGPT about their thoughts on academic integrity. And interestingly, again, we have the idea that I don't have personal beliefs or thoughts. So that's, again, coming back to that human element, but this time saying, well, actually, I don't have that. I can't give you that, but I can give you information and insights. And I was listening to Anne and Ellen earlier on talking about honesty and talking about trust and a code of honour. And those are the things that came up when ChatGPT was asked about academic integrity. So those are the things that I wanted to focus on a little bit. For me, in terms of academic integrity, a common understanding, a shared understanding is really important. And I think the work of NAIN, our National Academic Integrity Network, was really useful in setting out the standard here. So again, we have that honest moral behaviour. And again, we're trying to kind of share that behaviour in an academic setting with our students. So whether it's professional standards or whether it's practices that are ethical, value-based, as Cormac mentioned a while ago, we're looking at this culture of academic integrity. But even with all of that, even though our students know there's an academic integrity policy somewhere along the line, or there are academic regulations and there are things they should and shouldn't do, you can see these kind of headlines. And I spoke to a second year student, not in TUS, but a second year student who recently told me that most students who write essays use ChatGPT. And when I said that I was doing a presentation on AI and academic integrity, the student was actually horrified that we would know about it. Imagine that, we would know about it. And I said, look, we've known about it for quite a while. We're just kind of debating what we're going to do about it. But the fact that is that our students are going to use it. And if we put in place, I suppose, a policy that really punishes students for doing this, or if we try and stop them from using it, they're just going to find a workaround, okay? Bear in mind, they're coming from a generation that is so used to finding workarounds for everything. So what I propose then is, and I think it's kind of common knowledge or probably an accepted approach, is the idea of a multifaceted approach. So Billy Kelly said it's only a threat if we don't adapt. Julie mentioned earlier the idea of evolving or adapting, and we really do need to adapt, not to ban. I think one of the knee-jerk reactions around AI, say in some of the conversations I've had is, oh, that's it, we're going to have to go back to exam halls, pen and paper, writing for 3 hours. And I think that's possibly the worst thing we could do. So let's not panic just yet. Let's think about different ways that we can approach this. And these are kind of 4 areas that I think we might be able to focus our minds and do something about it. So first of all, looking at the guardrails that we have in place. Obviously, we have to provide our students with information around our policies and regulations and what it means to be a professional, what it means to comply to particular standards and so on. So what do we have to discourage academic misconduct? Secondly, then, how can we use it? Let's not bury our heads in the sand. How can we use it? Cormac just mentioned using AI for that sustainability piece. What other ways can we use AI to help our students to learn? Let's look at assessment then. Is the essay dead? Potentially, let's maybe think about redesign, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're measuring competency. We're not measuring information retrieval, and that's, I suppose, important as well. And that final piece then is fostering a culture of integrity. When we were talking about plagiarism a number of years ago, plagiarism seemed to be the buzzword. And for us in TUS, it had negative connotations. So it was always kind of coming at it from a punitive approach. And we decided to kind of reduce our use of the term plagiarism, but really foster that academic integrity approach. So focusing on the positive, even things like using Turnitin as a formative tool, but focusing on the positive and trying to foster that culture. So if we look at policies first of all, and these are a couple of questions I think that we need to ask ourselves. Does the policy need to be updated? Perhaps policies have specifically mentioned things like plagiarism or essay mills or whatever the latest threat was. Maybe it needs to explicitly include artificial intelligence. However, maybe your policy states that if it's not the student's own work, and maybe that it's sufficient in the context of what the students need to have communicated to them. The sustainable piece, what I mean by that is more scalability. So, for example, if it's a thing that your procedures point everyone in one direction for AI or plagiarism or whatever other academic misconduct, is that scalable? Is it sustainable over a period of time as well? And then is it visible? Do students know where this is? Are they familiar with the regulations? Does it sit in a document that is accessed only when something goes wrong? Or is it something that's discussed regularly with the students? I suppose for me, of late, I've started to tell students about the regulations within the context of the assignment discussion, within the context of the the assignment brief, and what's expected of them. So again, this is what I want you to do. This is what I think is appropriate, and obviously the flip side of that coin. These kind of quotes are a little bit concerning. Now, they're not from the Irish context, but it is concerning that students don't know what their educational institution has in terms of rules or guidelines. And even the idea that that second year student didn't realise that we would know, what AI was. So those kind of things mean that we have a little bit more work to do, I would suggest. But again, perhaps maybe in your institutions it's slightly different. I thought this was useful as well in the context of looking at the higher level policymakers or looking at the value-based principles. And I think that the image or the link is also there at the bottom. So in terms of teaching and learning, I just did a bit of a troll through different sites to see where there are suggestions for learning and teaching. How might we use it to help our teachers teach and our students learn? And you can see by the AI generated image that I have there in the bottom right hand corner, that was one of the students who has ADD and dyslexia. And to be able to use AI to help them with their writing really was transformative. So if we think about it in terms of how it might transform learning for somebody whose first language is not English, for somebody who has difficulty with writing, for somebody who has difficulty getting their thoughts together, or as I have a student who contacted me yesterday, somebody who just has writer's block and doesn't know where to start. That's something you can think about in the context of using it for teaching and learning. Other suggestions are there, they came from New Whole Weeks in Richmond, and I think they're useful as a starting point. In terms of assessment, I think the key is, and I think I've heard it time and again over the last while about what we need to do. We do need to think about assessment design, because that is our the biggest, I suppose, tool in our kit. How might we look at assessment design? This was the one thing, I suppose, that made the headlines back in December 22. The college essay was dead. And I think that's difficult because for students who need to write, the college essay is important. But how we manage that in the context of AI will be interesting. I don't necessarily think that it is dead, but it's probably dead in its current form. And we might just need to be a little bit more creative about how we use it. Those are some assessment design ideas as well. And I think if you look down through them, a lot of them are around active, applied, authentic learning opportunities. So looking at your assessments in the context of getting students to demonstrate competency in a particular way, or even using AI, but using it in a way that doesn't compromise academic integrity, in a way that builds or develops their critical skills, and in a way that looks to those future skills of adaptability and so on that we talked about earlier on. Those are the kinds of things that I think that's where we probably should go in the context of assessment design. We've already made great inroads, I think, over the last number of years around authentic assessments, active learning, applied assessments. And I would hate for this to happen. I really would hate for us to go back to the written exam, because if you think about the unnatural environment that the exam is, we're asking students to write for 2 to 3 hours, something they generally don't do. And I know those of you who favour writing and think that the art of writing and the skill of writing is really important in terms of processing ideas and so on. It's not natural for our students. So I suppose let's not be tempted to go back unless we really, really need to. And as you can see, I wouldn't be a huge advocate for exams. So that would be my thinking on it. So it's getting the balance right, I suppose, is the key thing. It's looking to see where it's safe, where it's good, where it's appropriate to use AI. This is an image from a UNESCO guide. I have a reference just at the end of it. And it is even just to talk to students, or to use this with students, to talk to them about where it's possible or where it's okay to use AI. Because to say that they're not allowed to use it is, I think, a little bit naive on our part. So let's see if we can get the balance right. This was interesting as well, and you'll note for the images that I've used that are AI generated that I put in the prompts, because I think one of the skills is around getting the prompt right. Some of the images that are generated with DALL-E, in any case, or Imogen from Google, they are horrendous. So you really need to get your prompts right in order to get the image that represents what you want. So there's a skill there as well. But even acknowledging the fact that you've used AI in terms of generating particular information, it's taking responsibility for the content. And I think that's the key. The humans remain responsible for the result, for the content. Therefore, we need to at least be transparent and honest and have integrity when it comes to that, to sharing that information. So I'm going to finish. Really, I think it is important for us to learn. We have been here before with different educational technology developments, probably not as profound as this one for a good while, but I do think we can learn from it. We can use it. If you think about all of the administrative tasks that we do now as educators, it might help us to become a little bit more efficient. It is within our interest to use the tools, but always to remember that we have the conversations with students around integrity, around values, around what's appropriate, and around honesty. So I have a few references at the end just to share with you. These ones are Padlets that have been collaboratively filled out with different ideas and different resources as well. So hopefully you can either take a screenshot and have a look at them, or we might get to share the slides. But that's me. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Geraldine. Thanks so much. I think that was really fitting to end the session on. Just some comments that you mentioned. I thought multifaceted approach around AI, how you referred to policy reflection consultation. With your assessment redesign, it brought me back to what Gilly Salmon had done in her survey earlier on, that the vast majority of people today want to evolve and transform. So I think the positivity was there. But I thought I saw a quote in the corner of one of your slides from Billy Kelly of Nain, and he said, "It's only a threat if we don't adapt." And I thought that was very fitting as well. So Geraldine, thanks so much. So that brings our session. I just want to thank Ellen and Cormac and Geraldine for their presentation today. So just a short round of applause to say thanks. And I know now we're going to move over to the close of the session with Karina. But in this room, I'd like to thank Orla, Ronan and his colleagues for the AV and sound and video support throughout. Okay, so thanks everybody.
Thanks very much.